tutorial for my Heath hand warmers, a simple beginner's crochet project I designed specifically so I could make this tutorial for YouTube. The hand warmers are worked in one piece from bottom to top in only 19 rounds, and then we join and make a really simple 2-round finish for the thumb here. I'm going to show you in as much detail as I possibly can. It's probably not going to be terribly professional, but I've divided the video into chapters for each part of the hand warmer. So if you click on the arrow at the bottom right to this video, you'll open up the description box. So the little arrow should be about here. And you'll find in the description box the pattern written out, and you'll find the chapters and any other useful info I can think of there as well. And I'll also include the links to where you can find the pattern on my blog, and also a paid for downloadable PDF that you can print out and keep, and we'll have links to the video, all the different parts of the video in that as well. I've included 2 sizes to the pattern, the standard size and a slightly smaller size. I've got quite small hands, so I just wanted to make a slightly smaller version that's a bit more snug. That's the one I'm wearing now, but I'll show you what the slightly bigger size looks like. So here's the slightly bigger size, which as you can see fits just slightly loose, so it's really comfortable. They're designed to fit just below the wrist. This yarn, in case you're interested, is Craft House Magic DK in her Land of Make Believe colourway, which is absolutely beautiful. You can also play about with them and make them a bit longer, like this one. And this yarn is Giddy Knit in Poo Sticks. I've made this about 4 rounds in the wrist longer and a couple of rounds in the cuff longer. I'm going to use a variegated yarn for this. I'm going to use Hayfield Spirit Double Knitting, but any DK weight yarn will do. And the gauge is given underneath in the description box and also in the pattern. I'm using a 3mm hook, but you'll just need to use whatever hook gives you the gauge that's given, or just ignore that and dive in, live dangerously. So let's get started with the tutorial. There's just a few more things you're going to need. You're going to need a pair of scissors, you're going to need a darning needle, and you're going to need 2 or 3 stitch markers, and that's all. Let's get started. First things first, let's move the scissors out the way. We're going to make a slip knot. So I've got the end of my yarn to the left, and I really hope that the camera's not wobbling too much. I've had to set it up on my iPhone. And what I do is I hold it like this. I use my thumb to twist it. I grab the end bit of the yarn, put my finger through, keep hold of both ends and pull it. Ta-da! I'm sure there's better methods or ways of showing you how to do a slip knot, but that's how I do it. Then when you put it on the hook, you can just pull the ends and it will tighten. You need to leave a little bit of an end for sewing up. That's, I'd say, about 4 inches, 3 or 4 inches. And then we're going to chain 36. So we're just going to yarn over and pull through, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through, and keep doing that until you've done it 36 times. There we go, there's our 36 chains, and if you need to just go back and count and check that you've done the right amount, you count the V's. Let me use my needle here to show you. So every chain and every crochet stitch, actually, no matter which crochet stitch you make, is made up of a V. Can you see V there? There's always a V at the front, and this is important for in a minute. On the back, every crochet chain has a little bump here. Bump, 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 bumpity, bumpity, bump. Okay, that is the anatomy of a chain. V and bump on the back. So we're going to join to work in the round in a minute, and the usual way to do this would be to bring the 2 ends of your chain together, making sure that you don't twist anything so that all the chains are facing upwards, and you would work a slip stitch into the first chain you made by inserting your hook and yarning over, whoops, with the right bit of yarn, pulling it through the chain and the loop on your hook, and you've joined it in the round. We're working in American terminology, by the way, in this pattern. It's quite easy to convert it if you just look anywhere online. But basically, when I talk about making double crochets, I'm talking about, in UK terms, that would be called a treble. Single crochets would be called a double. But I'm not going to convert it all the way through because that's just confusing. So I'm working in American terms. So for the first round, we're going to make half double crochets. So if you were doing it in the usual way and you've joined in the round, you would chain 2, and that would count as your first half double crochet. Then you would yarn over and work into the next chain, put your hook into the 2 V's of the next chain, yarn over and pull through, and then yarn over and pull through all 3 loops on your hook, and you've made a half double crochet. And you would go all the way around into every single chain, yarning over, putting your hook in, yarning over, pulling through, and then yarning over and pulling through all 3 loops on your hook. And you'd go all the way around until you got back to the beginning, and then you would make a slip stitch in the top of this 2 chain to finish it off. But we're not going to do that. We're going to do it a different way, which I find a bit less of a faff. Just very carefully undo that. So we're going to use my upside down method. I don't know if this is actually my method. It's the method I use. It might already exist, and I just find it a bit easier than having to work into the chain. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to find the 4th chain from the hook. So I've got my loop that's on my hook. We're going to ignore that loop. We don't need that. We're not interested in it. This is the next chain, the one directly underneath the loop on my hook. Then you've got a chain here. That's the 2nd one from my hook. This is the 3rd one. And then the next one is my 4th chain from the hook. So I'm going to put my needle in there so we can see where we're going to go. Then we're going to flip it over so we see those bumps on the back. Bumps are only 1 strand, so they're a bit easier to work into. So I'm going to yarn over. I'm going to push my needle out of there, get it out of the way, and I'm going to insert my hook into the bump on the back of the chain, yarn over and pull through, and yarn over and pull through all 3 loops on the hook. So I've now made a half double crochet into the bump on the back of the chain, and you can see it pulls quite a bit, but don't worry about that, that's all going to even out. And then where I counted back, I've created a turning chain here. Okay, so we're going to do it again into the next bump. Yarn over, insert your hook into the next bump along. Ooh, yarn's a bit splitty. Yarn over and pull through, and yarn over and pull through all 3 loops on the hook. Let's do that one more time. Yarn over and put through the next bump. Yarn over and pull through. Yarn over and pull through all 3 loops on the hook, always working into the back. Now if your chain gets a bit twisted and you don't know where you are, just stop, turn it upside down. You will see the V's of your chain running neatly along the bottom, and you can just even out your chain. You can see which way up it should go, turn it round, and you'll be able to identify the bumps. Don't panic. If ever you feel you're getting a bit twisted, just stop. Have a look at the anatomy of the chain and keep going. Yarn over, into the bump, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through all 3 loops on your hook. And you're going to do that all the way to the end, and it's much less of a faff than having to work into the front of the chains or the top of the chains under those 2 V's. Well, I think it's less of a faff anyway. So press pause and I'll see you at the other end. Now, depending on how tightly you pulled your first chain, this last one might be a little bit trickier. So count to see how many you've done, check that you've definitely got to do one more and you're not getting confused, and you might just have to work it a little bit with your fingers to loosen it a bit. Mine's not too bad. There we go. And then you might just want to go back and double check you've definitely got 36, including that turning chain. So there's our turning chain. there, so that counts as 1. And then we're going to go 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34. Okay, so that's, you start off with a chain of 36, and that will ultimately give you 34 half double crochets when you get to the end. Perfect. Now we're going to join it in the round. So lay it out in front of you. You've got your starting tail there and your working yarn there. And then you want to fold it under like that. So you've got the turning chain where you began over here, and now you've got your working yarn and the end of your row matching up with it. And then you're going to work into the top of the turning chain. So when you look at the stitches, you're going to have the top of your first half double crochet here, there, and you don't want to work into that. You want to work into the chain before it at the top of that turning chain. So it's a bit of a faff. You have to just make sure you get under those 2 V's like that, yarn over, pull through, and then pull through the loop on your hook as well. And then just do a little check to make sure that that's all sitting, you haven't got a twist in it or anything, and I'm fine. It looks a bit funny because the turning chain is here and it's flapping about, and you've got this gap. So we're going to sort that out before we do anything else. So very gently just pull up your working yarn a bit so it doesn't unravel itself. Okay. You're going to thread your tail onto your needle. So here we have half double crochet here, and it's got a little bump at the bottom. I'm going to put my thumb over it so we ignore it. We are going to work into this bottom chain here with your needle. Pull it through like that. Then underneath the bottom, from front to back, the bottom of the next half double crochet, and pull that through to the back like that. Then come back round. You can do this any way that you fancy, really, that makes a neat join. And there's just that tiny little loop there at the bottom. I'm going to force my needle in there and pull it round to the back. There. So that's joined that gap at the bottom. I'm not going to weave the end in yet. I'm going to leave that still there, because at the end, if there's still a little gap or I'm not quite happy with it, I can either unweave it and do it again, or I can use that tail to weave it in a bit further. But for now, that's going to make the first row nice and stable, and we can continue and start with the rib. Moving on to round 2. So I'm going to chain 2, and that is not going to count as a stitch as we go into this front post back post half double crochet rib, which sounds impressively complicated but really isn't. So with the front post back post half double crochet rib, we're still working half double crochets, we're just putting them in a slightly different place. We're going to start with a front post half double crochet, so we're going to yarn over as we would normally, but instead of working into the next stitch, we're going to go around it. So we're working into that turning chain where we started, that counts as a stitch from round 1, the very first turning chain, and we're going to go behind the body of the stitch. So we're not going into the top of it as you would normally, into the V's at the top. We're going around that trunk of the stitch. We're going to yarn over and pull it through round the back, and then yarn over and pull it through all 3 loops on your hook. Now a little tip here, you've just made your first front post half double crochet. When you come round to start the next round, we're going to join with a slip stitch, and it can be a bit confusing if you're not used to this to see where to go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take one of my stitch markers and I'm going to put it into the stitch I've just made, into the top of that first half double crochet, front post half double crochet. So when I get round to the end of the round, I'll know for sure that that is my starting stitch where I need to make my slip stitch. Okay, now we're going to make a back post half double crochet. So we're going to yarn over again, and this time we're still going to work around the trunk of the next stitch, but instead of working from right to left behind the stitch, we're going to go behind the stitch and work from right to left in front of the stitch. So yarn over, pull through. This is the little bit more complicated, but just do it slowly and you'll be fine. I'm going to show you again, and then yarn over and pull through all 3. So the next stitch is this one. You can see the trunk of the stitch there. We're going to work a front post half double crochet, and we're going to alternate all the way around. So yarn over and work right to left behind the stitch, yarn over, pull it back, and yarn over and pull it through all 3. Now we're going to make another back post double crochet stitch, and you see whenever I make a stitch I pull it a bit so I can see where the trunks of my stitches are. So I'm going to yarn over and I'm going to work from right to left by going behind and coming across the front of the stitch. Grab the yarn, pull it back through, just go slowly. Sometimes you see I just dropped it. So yarn over again, around the back. It can be easier, so when you yarn over, hold this with your finger out, so you're almost holding it out the way. You can work through, hold that yarn the whole time, pull it through, and then you've got your 3 loops on the hook to pull it through. Let's do that once more before we go off on our own. Yarn over, right to left behind the stitch, yarn over, pull through all 3 loops. Back post half double crochet, yarn over, hold that, go behind and come back through to work across the front, pull it through, yarn over, all 3 loops on hook. So you're going to alternate the whole way round, front post half double crochet, back post half double crochet, until you come back and you'll finish on a back post half double crochet. And you should have 17 of each. So when you count, the front post double crochets are the ones that sit proud and forward, and the back post double crochets are the ones that sort of sit sunken back, and you'll have 17 of each, a total of 34 stitches. So press pause, work your way around to the end, I'll see you there. So I'm nearly there, and on the last 2 stitches, so I'm going to yarn over, right to left, around the back of that stitch from the front, and then my last one's going to be the back post half double crochet. So I'm going to yarn over, come from the back, right to left around the front of the stitch, pull it through, yarn over and pull through all 3 loops. And as you can see, we're now at the point where I can see there's no more stitches to go round, and I know because I put my stitch marker in here that this is my first front post half double crochet, and this little bit here is my turning chain, which doesn't count as a stitch. So we're going to go to round 3. We are going to join this round with a slip stitch to the top of the first front post half double crochet we made. So I'm just going to take my stitch marker out so it's not in my way whilst I do that. Yarn over and pull through the stitch, yarn over and continue pulling through the loop on your hook. Ta-da! You've made your first round of ribbing. Well done you. We've only got 2 more rounds of that to do. So we're going to chain 2 again. Again, that doesn't count as a stitch. And now this round's going to be a bit easier because you can kind of see the lay of the land now. You're going to yarn over and work round that first front post half double crochet you made in round 2. And again, just so that you know where you are when you come back to the end of the round, I'm just going to plonk the stitch marker in that first stitch. Then you're going to work your next back post half double crochet around the next back post half double crochet that you made in the previous round. So yarn over, hold that back, and it's much easier now to see where you are. I like to just kind of think of it as working under that first stitch and into the next. Put it through all the way around the back and you're done. And when you're working the front, it's much easier to see. So you're going to do that for round 3 and round 4. You just repeat the round 2 for round 3 and round 4. So go ahead and work on that, and I'll see you when we've finished the bottom cuff and we're ready to move on to the main mitt. I just want to show you something quickly. So I've just got to the end of round 3 and I'm about to join and start round 4. So it looks a little bit different when you get to the end of these rounds, and I just wanted to show you what to look out for. Here's your stitch marker that you put in the first front post half double crochet you made in round 3. Here is your starting 2 chain that doesn't count. When you get to the very last back post half double crochet, as you can see I've just made here, it can suddenly look like this bit is a front post double crochet, and you might get a bit confused and think you've miscalculated. You haven't. These are the starting chains. You won't notice them because they almost form part of the rib, but you don't work into them, you ignore them and work over them. One of the ways you can tell that it's a chain is it's got that tiny little line at the bottom here. Let me get my needle. Half of doing these kind of things is just learning how to read your work, basically. So this little line, this little horizontal line here, is at the beginning of one of the chain 2s, and that is because when you join it and you work your chain 2, it's coming out of a stitch, and that is the vertical line of a stitch. When you're working around for your front posts and back post half double crochets, you don't get that. So that's how you can identify that that is the chain that is not counting on these rounds anyway as a stitch. So we're going to ignore that little lumpy bit completely, and we're going to make our join, our slip stitch join, in the marked stitch like that. And as you can see, that sort of bumpy bit created by the chains just kind of becomes part of the rib. And when I make the chain 2 to start round 4, you can see there the vertical line it creates at the bottom as it comes out of the stitch. I hope that makes that bit a bit clearer. I'll see you at the end of round 4. Okay, I'm at the end of round 4. Hopefully you have successfully managed that as well. So just take a moment to appreciate how lovely and squidgy this is, and the fact that you are just under a quarter of a way to a finished mitt. Doesn't look like it, but you've made huge progress. Well done you. So we're going to move on to the main mitt pattern now, which is the granny stitch. Let's just get my finished one to show you. So we've done this bit, and we're going to move on to the granny stitch bit. Now it's really important that in the written pattern, and I'll tell you in the tutorial as well, that you pay attention to which side you are working, because we're going to actually work backwards and forwards, turning at the end of each round. So to stay on track, you need to know whether you should be on the right side or the wrong side. It gives you that in the pattern, and I'll tell you as we go. So for round 5, we're working into the right side, which means it's the side that you will see when you're wearing it on your hand. So we're going to chain 3, and that counts as a double crochet, and make 2 double crochets into the same stitch as that chain. So yarn over, insert it into the stitch, yarn over, pull through, 3 loops on your hook, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2 again, and that is a double crochet. We're going to do another one in that same stitch. Yarn over, insert into stitch, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2 loops, yarn over, pull through 2 loops. So you've got a cluster of 3 DCs or double crochets in that one stitch, and one of those double crochets is made up of your initial chain 3. You're going to skip the next 2 stitches, so you're going to skip a back post and a front post and go into the next back post from round 4. Yarn over, or if you want to, you can just count the V's. So skip that V, work into the 3rd V. Yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2 loops, yarn over, pull through 2 loops, a double crochet, and work 2 more double crochets into that same stitch. So we're working the granny stitch. Skip 2, work 3 double crochets into the next stitch. And you're going to work like this all the way around, skipping 2 stitches, then working 3 double crochets into the next stitch until you have 3 stitches remaining. Okay, so here I am towards the end of round 5, and as you can see, I've just made my 3 double crochet cluster, and I've got 3 stitches left. A back post half double crochet, a front post half double crochet, and a back post double crochet. 1, 2, 3. I'm going to skip 1, the back post, and if you've done this right and you're on track, if you skip 1, you're going to be working into the next stitch, which will be a front post double crochet. If it's not, you might want to go back and check you've skipped the right amount of stitches further back in the round, because at this point, when you skip 1, this should be a front post double crochet from round 4, the one that protrudes. Is protrudes the right word? I'm not sure. So skip 1, and then you're going to work your cluster of 3 double crochets into that next stitch. Oops. Oh, what am I getting caught on here? This yarn is a bit splitty. Okay, there we go. And then to finish off, you're going to make a slip stitch into the top of that chain 3 that you started with. So there's the first chain, second chain, third chain. Go through both V's, pull it through the loop on your hook, and there you go. You have completed it. Now at this point, we're going to turn to work round 6, but I'm going to make my chain 3 first. So at the beginning of round 6, it says to chain 3, but I don't know, whenever it tells me to turn and then chain, I always chain and then turn. Even in my own pattern, I'm breaking the rules. So I've done my chain 3 and I've turned, and we're ready to start round 6, which is on the wrong side, which is the side you won't see when you're wearing it. It's the inside outside. Okay, so round 6 is the wrong side. We've done our chain 3. And we're going to work 2 more double crochets, because this chain 3 counts as a double crochet. We're going to work 2 more into the gap underneath, the gap between the 2 clusters of double crochets from round 5. Then we're going to skip the next cluster and work 3 double crochets into that next gap between clusters. And we're going to keep doing that all the way round. We're going to work 3 double crochets into each gap until we come back round and there are no more gaps to work into. So off you go, 3 double crochets into each gap around, please, and I'll see you at the end of round 6. So here I am at the end of round 6. I've just made my last 3DC cluster there, and I'm now going to join again in the top of that starting chain 3 that I made. Just there. Yarn over, pull through, and pull through the loop on my hook to make a slip stitch. So now we're going to turn to work round 7, and as you know I'm going to break the rules and make my chain 3 now. Then I'm going to turn, and we're back on the right side for round 7, and for round 7 and for round 8 and for round 9 we're basically just going to repeat what we've just done in round 6. So we've chained 3, we work 2 double crochets into the gap to make our first 3DC cluster, and then we're going to work 3 DCs into every gap around. So you're going to do that on round 7, which will be the right side, and then as with round 6 you're going to turn at the end and work back round. But I'll show you at the end of each round so you know that you're on track, just in case you don't have the pattern in front of you. So round 7, repeating round 6, we're just making 3 DCs into every gap around. Okay, we're at the end of round 7. So we're going to make our slip stitch into the top of that starting chain 3. Illegally make our chain early and turn. And now we're on the wrong side for round 8. And again, 2 DCs into the gap below. And then we're going to go 3 DCs into every gap all the way around. Okay, that's me at the end of round 8, and we're going to, as we've done over the last few rounds, join in the top of that beginning chain 3. Like that. That chain 3 that I did there was a bit messy, but don't worry, no one's going to notice. Then we're going to, let's do it the proper way, shall we? We're going to turn and then chain 3, like the pattern says. And then work our 2 double crochets into the gap. So I'm aware that I've kind of sped up now, having shown you how to do the stitches nice and slowly before. So we'll do it one more time, just as a recap. We're going to work into every gap around 3 double crochets. So it's yarn over, through the gap, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2 loops, yarn over, pull through 2 loops. That's your double crochet. Keep going, and I'll see you at the end of round 9. I should have said at the end of round 5, and I completely forgot, so I would have put it on the screen. But at the end of round 5 you should have had 12 3 double crochet clusters. So if you go around and count all these clusters around, you should have 12 clusters from round 5, and in every round we've done so far of these granny cluster stitches. So 3 times 12 is, or 12 times 3 is 36. I had to refer to the pattern there because I couldn't remember. Terrible. It says all this on the pattern, so if you've got it printed out you already know this, or if you've got it on your iPad or whatever. But just in case you're working only from the video, now you know. So we've reached the end of round 9. I have 3 very exciting pieces of news at this point. One is I have reached a colour change on my variegated yarn, which is exciting. We've gone from grey to beige. The other one is that you are just about under halfway through making your mitt. Again, it doesn't look like it, but you're at round 9 of 19, so you've only got 9.5 more rounds to go. No? Yes, 9.5 more rounds to go. And the third piece of exciting news is we've reached the bit where we create the thumb hole at round 10. So we're going to join round 9, as we have done in the previous few rounds, with our slip stitch into the top of the starting chain 3. Like that. And we're going to still turn and chain 3, or chain 3 and turn, depending if you're being rebellious or not. It still counts as a double crochet, and we're still going to do our 2 double crochets into the gap underneath. We're working on the wrong side for round 10. So we're going to go round and make 3 double crochets into each gap, as we have done for the last few rounds, until there are no gaps left to work into. And if you meet me at the end of this round, I'll tell you what we do next. So we have reached the end of round 10, but we are not going to join this time. That is the difference between this round and the previous ones. We are not going to join into the top. We're going to turn without joining. Okay, and then we're going to chain 3, which counts as a double crochet. We're going to skip this first cluster of 3 double crochets, and we're going to make 3 double crochets in the next gap. Oops. And then, quite simply, we're going to make our 3 double crochet clusters in each gap all the way around until there are no gaps left. So here we are at the end of round 11. I've just made my 3 double crochets into that last gap. There are no gaps remaining. I've just got this 3DC cluster from round 10. So what I'm going to do is skip 2 and make 1 double crochet in the last stitch. I'm going to skip 2 of these, and then basically I'm making a double crochet into that turning chain, which is a stitch, so I should call it the stitch, but it's made of the turning chain. So into the top of that turning chain I'm going to make a double crochet. So at the end of round 11 you can see I've got let me just put my hook down. At the end of round 11 you can see that where I started I've got a single double crochet, and then I've got all the clusters going around, and then I end with a single double crochet, so it matches. And we're on the right side, but we're going to turn for round 12 to the wrong side again. So we're not going to join, we're just going to do our chain 3 and turn. And then this time we're going to work 1 double crochet into the gap underneath here between that single double crochet stitch and the 3 double crochet cluster in there. So effectively what we have now is a 2 double crochet cluster there. We're going to skip this next cluster and work 3 double crochets into the next gap. And we're going to work those 3 double crochets into each gap around until there are no gaps. Oh no, that's not true. We're going to work it all the way round for round 12 until there are 4 stitches remaining, which will be the 3 DC cluster here, then there's the gap, and then there's the turning chain. So we're going to work in each gap around on the wrong side until we get to those last 4 stitches. How exciting! At the end of round 12 we've just gone into blue on my variegated yarn. So as you can see I've got the 4 stitches remaining, the 3 double crochet cluster and that single turning chain that we began with. We're going to skip the 3 DC cluster and we're going to make 2 double crochets into the gap between that cluster and the turning chain. Nice and easy. So again, if you see, we started round 12 with a little cluster of 2, and we end round 12 with a little cluster of 2, so it's matching. Very nice colours, isn't it? Quite like this. Okay, time to work round 13. So we're going to do our chain 3, which counts as a stitch, and turn, or turn and do your chain 3. I don't know why I've made this so complicated and keep doing that. And we are going to skip this first 2 DC cluster and work 3 double crochets DCs into the gap between the 2 cluster and the 3 cluster of double crochets. See? So we've got the turning chain 3 here, which counts as a stitch, and then we skip these and work our 3 DCs into that gap. And as with the previous rounds, we're going to work our 3 DCs into every gap around. And you're going to do that until there are no gaps left to work into. So it's the end of round 13. As you can see, I've just worked into the last gap and there's a 2 double crochet cluster remaining. I am going to make a double crochet. I'm going to skip one of these stitches and make my double crochet into the next one, which is the turning chain, which counts as a stitch. There we go. So that's how it looks, and if I show you again, it means it matches how it looks on the other side. And it is time to join to start working back in the round. So we're not going to turn, we're going to stay on the right side as we move into round 14, and we're going to make a slip stitch into the top of that chain 3 that we made at the beginning of round 13. Pull through, and we've made a thumb hole. Okay, we're nearly there. You've only got 6 more rounds and you've basically just about finished the mitt, other than finishing off the thumb. Isn't that amazing? So the first thing we're going to do is, now that we've joined, is we're going to turn to work on the wrong side again. So as usual, I'm going to make my chain 3 first. Turn, and then we're going to make 2 double crochets into the thumb hole gap, this gap here. So just as you would in any other gap in the previous rounds, make your 2 double crochet. If you could hear that coughing in the background, that's my husband. He has hay fever and he walks about the house coughing. I did warn him I was filming a tutorial, but if you've got a cough, you've got a cough. Okay, so there we go. That's our first cluster into that thumb hole on the wrong side. And then we've got that single crochet here, and then the cluster of 3. And we're going to skip all of those. So you're skipping 4 stitches, this one and the 3DC cluster, and work your 3DCs into the next gap. And you're going to keep working your 3DCs into each gap around until you have 4 double crochets remaining, which will be a 3DC cluster plus a single DC at the end. When I say DC, I mean double crochet. So here we are at the end of round 14. As you can see, we have the 3DC cluster here and the turning chain here. We're going to skip all 4 of those and join with a slip stitch into the top of our starting chain 3, like that. And we're going to turn to the right side to start round 15. Isn't this yarn working up beautifully? Really coastal type of colours. I can highly recommend it. I've enjoyed working with it, and it's really fun to see the colours change. I'll put a link to it underneath. It is Hayfield Spirit double knitting, and the colour, oh, it's shade 0401, in case you're interested. I'll put it all underneath the video. Oh, I've lost what I'm doing now. What was I doing? Oh yes, I was turning back to the right side for round 15. So we're going to make 2, after you've done your chain 3, you're going to make 2 double crochets. Whoops. Getting all excited because we're near the end. 2 double crochets into the gap, like that. And then we're going to make clusters of 3 double crochets into every gap all the way around until there are no gaps left. Okay, here we are on the right side at the end of round 15. We are going to join as usual with a slip stitch to the top of the starting turning chain, which again I've done really messily. But by the time I've finished, it won't notice. Crochet is very forgiving. There we go. Now, I have more good news at the end of round 15. Not only has my yarn now changed to dark blue, but there is no more turning to worry about. From now on, we're only going to work on the right side, no more turning. And we're going to do the top cuff. So there's some more rib to make. It's slightly different to the rib we did at the start, because this is going to be front post, back post double crochets rather than half double crochets. So we're going to start with a chain 3, and this does count as a stitch, and we're going to make 1 double crochet into the same stitch as that chain. So the one that chain comes out of is the same stitch we're going to work into. And we're going to make a double crochet like that, and then we're going to make 1 double crochet in the top of every stitch all the way around. And by the time you've done that all the way around, when you count them, you should have 34 double crochets. There we go. So take a moment, have a look, go back and count. Have you got 34? Shall we see if I've done this right? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, 26, 28, 30, 32, 34. Excellent, we're on track. So that's the end of round 16. Moving on to round 17. So we're at the end of round 16, we're going to just join with a slip stitch to that first chain 3, which does count as a stitch. So we're going to join like that. And then for round 17, we're going to chain 2, and that does not count as a stitch as we go into our rib. And we're going to make a front post double crochet around the stitch below. Now, because these stitches are a little bit longer, it's going to be a bit easier. So you yarn over and you work from right to left around the back of the trunk of that stitch. Pull it through, yarn over through 2 loops, yarn over through 2 loops. For the next one, we're going to make a back post double crochet. So we're going to yarn over, hold that yarn back a bit, and then from the back come through and work from right to left across the front of the stitch, pull it back through, yarn over through 2 loops, yarn over through 2 loops. And we're going to alternate with front post right to left behind the stitch, through, yarn over through 2 loops, yarn over through 2 loops, and back post, yarn over, come from the back right to left across the front of the stitch, pull it through the back. Oops, I've just dropped my yarn over there. I forgot to hold it. Yarn over through 2, yarn over through 2. So we're going to alternate front post, back post, double crochet stitches all the way around. And again, I'm going to mark that first front post double crochet stitch that I made, so I don't get lost when I come back. So it was that one, wasn't it? So I don't get confused by my turning chain. So go ahead and do that, and I'll see you at the end of round 17. So when you get to the end of round 17, you will end on a back post double crochet. And at this point you should have 17 front post double crochets and 17 back post double crochets, giving you a total of 34 stitches. Again, we're going to avoid this little turning chain of 2, and we're going to make a slip stitch to that first front post double crochet we started with to join the round. I'm going to get rid of that stitch marker because it'll be in my way. Oops, just caught the yarn there. So for round 18, again, we're going to chain 2, which won't count as a stitch. And then we're going to work a front post double crochet around the front post double crochet in the row underneath, so from row 17. And let's place that marker in there so that we know where we are when we get to the end, know where to join. Okay, back post double crochet. And we're going to alternate all the way around, work a front post double crochet around all the front post double crochets from the previous round, and a back post double crochet around every back post double crochet from the previous round. And you'll be ending on a back post double crochet, and your stitch count will be the same as it was for row 17. So you should have 34 stitches made up of 17 front post and 17 back post double crochets. So I'm just at the end of row 18. There's my marker from the beginning of row 18, and there's my chain 2. I've just made a back post double crochet, and I'm going to join with a slip stitch. And guess what? You're about to do the last row of the mitt. Can you believe it? Let's just take that marker out for a minute. Ooh. So for the very last round, round 19, we're going to repeat round 18. So chain 2, and then we're going to be alternating front post, back post, double crochets all the way around, ending on a back post double crochet. So we've arrived at the end of round 19, and we're not going to join because we're going to fasten off invisibly. So what I'm going to do is cut my yarn, leaving a fairly long tail to give me plenty of wiggle room to sew it in. I'm going to pull that end all the way through, so just pull up the loop that you're working with. It's not going to unravel, and pull it all the way through, so it's like that. Thread the end onto a needle, and I'm going to show you how to join this off sort of almost invisibly. And again, this is how I do it. I don't think I've ever looked up how to do it, so this is how I do it. It might be different than the official way. So, I haven't put the marker in, but basically this V here is the top of the turning chain, so we're not going to be working into that. We want to work into the V of the front post double crochet here. So if I put in a marker at the beginning of round 19, it would be in this stitch. So I'm going to work under the stitch after that. So this is the first stitch of the round, and I'm going to work into the stitch after that. I'm going to put my needle under the 2 V's and pull the yarn through like that. And then I'm going to bring my needle back down, and you see where, so my yarn is coming out of this last stitch, and where that last stitch V disappears in here, I'm going to insert my needle in there. So it's going to basically go through the middle of the second to last stitch of the round, and it's going to look like that at the back. So you're going through that first, the back strand of the V, and then the strand of the stitch underneath. I'm going to give it a pull. You don't want to pull it so tight that it really pulls. You want to pull it so that the V that it creates by doing this looks like a normal size. So this is the V I've just created by sewing in the end. If I pull it too tight, it's going to be too small. But if I just tug it a bit and let it sit, it will look like the other stitches. And then it's just a case of securing that yarn so it doesn't go anywhere. So what I normally do is just find a strand that you're not going to see and wrap it round. Maybe even going through to tie a little, secure a little knot, just a little single knot, just checking it's not distorting the stitch in any way at the top. And then I usually just weave it through until I get a nice bulky bit of the back of the rib, and then I just weave it through that, and I try to go through the yarn itself, like catch little strands of the yarn itself. This is quite grippy yarn, which is handy, so that it's getting really stuck and tangled up in there, so it's not going to go anywhere. And if I feel like weaving it in anymore, I might just go along a bit here, catching yarn until the next raised bit of the back of the rib, and maybe come up again until I'm convinced that it's not going to be going anywhere. And then I'm just going to cut it. Now that's looking pretty good. So you've got the top bit of your rib, you've got the hole for your thumb, and you've got the bottom bit where you started. So if you remember this bit, and I said, oh, I might come back to it. So I'm just having a look at it now, sitting on my wrist. I'm quite happy with that. So I think I'm just going to go back. I'm going to thread my needle with that tail, and I'm just now going to secure that end and weave it in, because I'm happy with how it looks. Okay, I think I'm happy with that. I'm just going to snip the end. And your mitt is pretty much done. All we need to do now is finish off that thumb. Here's how mine is looking. I really love this yarn and how that's done a kind of self-striping thing. That's amazing. Luckily I've got 2 balls of it, so I'll be able to match the colours. I think where I've been filming, I've been working a bit more loosely. So these fit me quite loosely. But I don't mind that. Don't mind that at all. I might make another pair in my smaller size as well. And as you can see, it does sit quite high on my wrist, because that's how it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be that you could wear it if you were like typing or something, but you can easily make that longer by adding extra rounds after the first rib. As long as the first round of the thumb hole, which is round 10, is on the wrong side, then you can just add rounds to the wrist. So you'd always have to add in multiples of 2. That's right, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah, so like I said, with my longer ones, I added 4 extra rounds. Okay, let's do the thumb. Now this is going to seem complicated when we start, but it really is incredibly simple. So we're going to take our yarn, and again, we're going to start with a slip stitch, like we did at the beginning. And with your mitten the right way up, so you've got the bottom facing you and the top at the top away from you, you're going to pick up your mitt and look at the thumb hole, and at the bottom of the thumb hole there is a 3DC cluster. You should be able to see that really clearly. And we're going to join our yarn with a slip stitch to the center of those the center stitch of that 3DC cluster, so the one in the middle. So put our hook in. Just going to get that tail out of the way, and pull the yarn over and pull it through that stitch and through the loop that you made on your hook with your slip stitch. There we go. We have joined the yarn. We're going to chain 1 to begin. It doesn't count as a stitch, and we're going to make a single crochet in that very same stitch where we've joined the yarn. So we insert, I'll just show you the single crochet. You insert the hook, then you yarn over and pull it through. You'll have 2 loops on your hook. I had to pause there because there was a motorbike going past outside. And then you pull it through those 2 loops. And I'm going to again suggest that you put a stitch marker in that first stitch that you made, so that when you come back round you can be exactly sure where that first single crochet stitch is, and you don't get confused with your starting chain. Okay, so we're going to put a single crochet into the next stitch in that 3DC cluster, and then we'll be working up the side of the thumb hole. We're going to make 2 single crochets around the body of every double crochet up the side of the thumb. So by that I mean turning it on its side. Here's the double crochet on its side. We're just going to insert the hook underneath that edge of the double crochet. So you're basically going between the 2 double crochets, and just work your double crochet as normal. Grab the yarn, pull it through the 2 loops on your hook. You're going to do 2 around each. There you go, so that's our first 2 made. Now we arrive at a single double crochet stitch here, so it's not in a cluster, it's just by itself. So we go underneath it, pull the yarn through, yarn over and pull through 2 loops. Do that again. 2 more made. Now we arrive at a 2 DC cluster, so we're just going to go in between those 2. So we're going underneath the one on the edge, grab the yarn, pull it through, grab the yarn through the 2 loops. Do that again. And then the final edge of the double crochet on this side of the thumb is a single one here. So we go underneath, pull the yarn through, yarn over through 2 loops on the hook, and do it again. So you've made your first two single crochets at the bottom, and then you've done 2, 4, 6, 8 single crochets up the side. You've got the bottom of a 3DC cluster here at the top of the thumb. We're going to ignore that completely, turn it round, so we've now got the other side of the thumb in front of us, starting with a double crochet that's sitting on its own here. We're going to go under that, pull the yarn through, yarn over through 2 loops on hook to make a single crochet. Do that again, so that you've worked 2 single crochets around that first stitch. There's a 2 DC cluster here, so we're just going to work in between under that edge one, put it through and make 2 single crochets around there, down to the single double crochet. Oh, that's confusing, isn't it? So the double crochet on its own and work 2 single crochets, whoops, around that one. And then your last one, you've got the 3 DC cluster and you're just working under that edge one. So you've made another 8 down that side. And then you're back to that cluster at the bottom of the thumb, and you want to work your final single crochet into that first cluster, double crochet of the cluster that we haven't worked yet. So you've joined in the middle and then worked the next one, but you haven't worked this first one yet. So I'm going to go in the top of that stitch. It's a bit tricky because you've also got a chain coming out of it, but you should be able to see it clearly. And I'm just going to catch my tail behind that stitch as well and work your single crochet. Now we're not going to join, we're just going to continue to work in the round. So at this point you've got your starting chain here, and then you can see clearly where you've marked your first stitch. So without doing any slip stitches or joining, you're going to go straight in and work a single crochet into that first single crochet you made in round one of the thumb border. And I'm going to remove my marker now that I've made that stitch, and I'm going to move it up and put it in the stitch I've just made, so I know where I'm finishing at the end. There we go. Now all you're going to do now is make a single crochet into every single stitch that you made in that last round. That's all. It'll be 19 single crochets, 8 up each side and 3 along the bottom. Okay, I've just reached the last stitch. Here's my marker in the very first stitch I made of the round, and we're going to fasten off invisibly again. So like we did before, we're going to cut the yarn, leaving ourselves a decent tail to play with, and then we're going to pull that all the way through and thread the end onto our needle. And then into the stitch we've marked, which I should probably take this out, otherwise that's going to be in my way. Ooh. So basically it's into the next stitch. So here's the stitch we've just worked into, and we're going to insert our needle into that not the next stitch, but the stitch after it, like that. And then back down into the last stitch of the round and the strand at the bottom behind it. Come a bit closer to show you. And then we're going to gently pull that to create a neat V to finish off. When you're happy with the placement, again, just choose a little area at the back where you know that you can invisibly just secure that so that it's not going to budge, come undone. And then weave your ends in. And there we have it, one finished hand warmer. Or if you've decided to add extra rounds, a little arm warmer. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. I hope you go off and make lots of lovely mitts in all different colours. Here's some examples of all the ones that I've been doing as I've been coming up with the pattern. They look amazing. They're really simple. You could make a pair of these in an evening, watching a couple of episodes of something on Netflix. You can buy the pattern without ads on a lovely printable PDF with all video links to all of the sections of this video, or you can get it for 100% free by going to my blog, looking underneath this video in the description box where it's all written out. And there are links underneath to everywhere you can go and find it in whatever form you wish to have it. So go forth, make mitts. Thank you so much for watching, and leave me a comment to let me know if you make them underneath. And don't forget to press like if you've enjoyed this video, and while you're down there you might as well hit subscribe if you're not subscribed already. See you next time. Bye.